This video was sponsored by Atlas. Don't care. Echoes of Wisdom is the black sheep of the Zelda family. That's not true at all. But like basically every Zelda game ever, it does feature a number of divisive elements. So while we all wait for my full review of the game, which by my estimate will go out sometime between next month and a year and a half from now, give or take, let's have a little fun and go over what I feel are the 7 best and worst things about The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. No particular order, alternating between good and bad. Let's go! Good thing. Echoes of Wisdom may share a lot of DNA with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but what I didn't expect was for it to feel like a big throwback to Ocarina of Time. It's funny because it was there in the first trailer and I didn't even notice it. Zelda in her classic ocarina dress, even trapped in a purple crystal. She's been trapped in a few different crystals over the years. You know, happens to the best of us. But next to the dress, that purple one was clearly a purposeful choice. And the references just keep piling up as you play. Echoes features the triumphant return of Deku Scrubs, which were featured heavily in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and then mostly forgotten by Nintendo for some weird reason. And Zelda games commonly feature iterations of certain enemies with slightly different names. But weirdly enough, this game straight up pits you against some of Ocarina's bosses. Obviously, they're not functionally identical, but their names are the same and they're very similar. You just sort of fight Volvagia in this game, I guess. He's just kind of there. There are other small references here and there, but the biggest is this game's connection to the origin story of the Zelda universe as established in Ocarina. It expands upon that story in a really interesting way, and there's a fine chance that that was what inspired the Zelda team to pull so much inspiration from that game. And hey, I'm an old man. Give me them references, you know? Give me that yummy nostalgia. Ocarina of Time was really my first Zelda game and probably the greatest gaming experience I'll ever have, so call back to it all you like. I don't mind. It's nice that Echoes of Wisdom pays homage to multiple Zelda games and not just the modern ones. Now for a bad thing. Let's get one of the more obvious ones out of the way first. The game's performance is not great. You play a massive game like Tears of the Kingdom with its sprawling world and its impossibly advanced Ultra Hand system with all its interactions and physics, and it's easy to see why the Switch struggles to handle it all sometimes. So why does Echoes of Wisdom, a top-down title with cutesy little toy graphics, run even worse? At times it runs flawlessly, a silky smooth 60 FPS, until it doesn't, which is a lot of the time. A mostly stable frame rate that dips occasionally when the action gets a little crazy or there are tons of things to render on screen at once, that's one thing. But Echoes swings wildly between 60 and 30 and everywhere in between, and sometimes it feels like even lower than 30. As many have said before me, Nintendo not simply capping the frame rate at 30, or at the very least offering an option to do so, is baffling. For me, it's the inconsistency I can't stand. It's genuinely distracting sometimes. It makes certain overworld areas very unpleasant to traverse. I know there are plenty of people who don't notice this sort of thing, and I am envious if that's you. But to me, the performance is one big mark against the game. Before we continue, a quick reminder that this video was sponsored by Atlas. Continuing their trend of throwing more gigantic, amazing games at us than we can possibly play, they just launched Metaphor ReFantazio. The creative minds behind Persona 3, 4, and 5 have taken the formula and given it a fantasy spin. Set in a stunning and unique world, Metaphor tells a nuanced story of connection, politics, morality, human nature. Social links between characters dig deeper than ever. The Persona style of turn-based combat is also deeper and more strategic than ever, with even more options for damaging foes outside of combat. This is more than just fantasy Persona, though. The archetype job system gives this title its own unique identity, offering a huge amount of flexibility and encouraging experimentation. All this with a UI and overall visual style that might just be Atlas's best yet. Countless folks are already hailing Metaphor ReFantazio as the best game in the modern Persona style, and undoubtedly the RPG of the year. It's out right now on Microsoft PC and Xbox, and you can hit the link in the description to learn more or pick up the game for yourself. If you want to give it a go right this second, I'll also include a link to the demo. Progress carries over to the full game, so check it out. Thanks again to Atlas. Now back to the video. Good thing. The core idea, being able to collect and conjure just about every enemy and object in the game, is a really interesting one. It gives Echoes of Wisdom this refreshing sense of freedom. It's fun to go into a challenge and ponder which of your many, many echoes you might use. There's this allure of finding the next interesting interaction, coming up with a novel solution to a weird problem. Tears of the Kingdom obviously offered something similar, but it was almost too open-ended. Echoes is like a simpler, more compact and streamlined version of the same idea. You technically have fewer options because ultimately you're just gonna spawn one or two things and see if your idea works, but your toolkit is very deep, so you're encouraged to spend time just playing around with stuff. And even when the puzzles aren't particularly complex and don't require a huge amount of thought, there's the simple novelty of being able to create all these enemies and objects. Controlling where these things appear and having them work for you rather than against you is a really unique opportunity. Whatever you may think about Echoes of Wisdom, it's got a primary gameplay hook all its own. Bad thing. Spawning any monster you want is a fun idea, but sometimes it's a little less fun in practice. There are times when my little friends just absolutely refuse to actually attack my enemies. They spend so much time winding up that they end up taking a hit, which stuns them and resets their attack animation. So they just get stun locked, winding up again and again, and then they die without doing anything. Sometimes I'm yelling at these stupid things to just attack already, just to swing, just lunge, just do something. Then if they do manage to attack, they miss constantly, or they don't attack the right enemy. The game's got a targeting system, but it barely helps. Sometimes it's impossible to actually target the right enemy, and sometimes even if you do lock onto something, your little cronies will just not listen. Combat can feel like wrangling playful kittens. It's just one big mess. And considering this game locks traditional combat behind a very limited energy gauge and basically requires you to utilize your echoes, this can all be pretty darn annoying. It still feels good when it works, and it's like you're managing this little army of baddies, but I really don't feel like it's good to be this frustrated this often when playing any game. Good thing. Conde! Conde's amazing. He's like the best Zelda character ever, man. Okay, not just Conde. This game surprised me with its characters. There are actually a nice little handful of NPCs who have interesting narrative arcs. Nothing incredibly deep, but it's something, you know? It's funny because we've had interesting characters in plenty of Zelda games, but something about this game being styled after Link's Awakening, with its relatively simplistic characters, yet exhibiting the stronger sense of character found in later games, consistently took me off guard. The art style is so cutesy that I was kind of shocked by each genuinely emotional beat. Much of the game is pretty basic Zelda stuff, but those little character moments were always a pleasant surprise. And there's Conde! I just love him. Oh, and he marks the return of the Yetis from Twilight Princess, which is not something I ever would have expected. He's got antlers like the Inoki from Spirit Tracks, but he's otherwise a Yeti, and that makes me happier than it probably should. Bad thing. This one will probably be controversial. I don't think Echoes of Wisdom's music is that good. It's not bad, don't get me wrong. It's just that it's not great either. It seems to slot right into this weird trend of Switch generation games with subpar soundtracks. Nintendo games, and Zelda games in particular, used to provide the absolute finest video game music possible. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were huge games, so they elected to utilize more minimalistic soundtracks. That made sense, but it had me longing for those stronger, more melody-driven tunes. Echoes of Wisdom was finally our chance to get some good old-fashioned Zelda music. And I just don't think it really pulls it off. The music is serviceable. Some standout tracks, sure, maybe some of these will grow on me a little over time, but there's really just not a lot that jumps out at me. And it's weird and frustrating. Good thing. Dungeons. Actual, honest-to-goodness dungeons, not open-ended playgrounds where you just gotta activate the 5 whatevers and head for the boss. Nah, this is the whole shebang. Puzzles, floors, maps, stairs, small keys, big keys. Oh, how I missed this. To be completely honest, I do have some issues with the quality of some of these dungeons, but we'll go over all that in the full review. Right now, I just want to bask in this reality where we have these dungeons at all. Especially considering Echoes of Wisdom tries to emulate the open-ended nature of modern Zelda to a degree, it's relieving that they came to the same conclusion many of us did, that a top-down Zelda ain't a top-down Zelda without dungeons. Bad thing. Dungeons are great. This game's bigger focus on puzzles is great. The echo mechanic is decently fun. But boy, some of the design in this game is questionable. It feels like for every good puzzle, there are one or two more that fall completely flat. I mean, it's the same problem with Tears of the Kingdom. Give us a bunch of different options for solving one problem. Most of those options probably won't be particularly clever or interesting. Too many of these puzzles on the surface seem like they're going to be complicated and require a lot of thought until you realize it just comes down to, oh, you spawn a thing and then you're done. It's pick the right thing, and even picking the thing is like nothing. Like, you can barely call these puzzles sometimes. It's another thing I will definitely be talking about in the review. Good thing though, look how stinking cute everyone is. Little chibi versions of these longtime Zelda races? Come on! We've had pixel art versions of some of them, but these 3D models are on another level of adorable entirely. Chibi Gorons and Zoras, oh, I love them. Chibi Deku Scrubs, oh, look at their little leaves. Chibi Gerudo, you kidding me here? It's too much. Heck, Chibi Ganon is looking pretty cute next to all these other characters. Clearly, it really has been far too long since Nintendo gave us a new top-down Zelda, because apparently I am starved for these smaller, cartoonier depictions. I would gladly take Amiibo for pretty much every NPC in the game. That obviously won't happen, but at the very least Nintendo could have thrown a plushie or two our way, right? Oh, Plushie Conde! Oh my gosh, I would pay. I would pay any amount of money for that. Bad thing, and another obvious one. Managing echoes stinks. Every single echo you collect gets added to the pile, and that's it. It's just a big pile of echoes you gotta deal with. Like in Tears of the Kingdom, you can sort them into a handful of categories, but also like in Tears of the Kingdom, this barely helps, and you'll spend a lot of time just scrolling and scrolling. It's not a huge problem since most areas will require a smallish set of echoes, but inevitably you'll find yourself digging through the menu looking for that one you need. There are about a million different ways Nintendo could have made this better, and they elected to do nothing instead, and it's really confusing. Good thing. And I think this is one of the very best things about the game, really. The open versus linear Zelda war rages on and on, with one army insisting that Sandbox Zelda is best Zelda, the other lamenting the good old days when we had to follow a more narrow path, but the adventure felt a bit more focused and meaningful for it. After Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I didn't know how Nintendo would handle a new top-down adventure, but I'm extremely pleased to say that Echoes of Wisdom's format is basically perfect. It's not quite Link Between Worlds or the original, where you can do most of the dungeons in any order, and it's not quite the others, where there's more or less one set order. Instead, you get batches of dungeons across different regions of the map, and you can tackle each batch however you want. And the Echo system gives you the ability to explore quite a lot of the map at any given time. So maybe you're still missing some of that ability gating from yesteryear, but the freedom is fun, and there's still a decent sense of progression. I just think the Zelda team did a really good job in this department. Bad thing. With such a relatively big world to explore, I guess it was kind of inevitable that Echoes of Wisdom would fall into the same trap as its modern brethren. You can only give the player so many heart pieces and rupees, so they unfortunately had to stuff the rest of the treasure chests with smoothie ingredients. This wouldn't be a problem if there were any reason to actually make smoothies, but man, there just kinda isn't. I made a handful of heart-replenishing smoothies throughout my playthrough, but that was it. There's just not much of a point in engaging with this system, which makes for a great number of anticlimactic puzzles. And to throw in a freebie bad thing, Dampé's automatons have to be the most easily ignored mechanic in any Zelda game ever. They're probably useful in the right situations, but you have to riddle out how to make each one, and then if they break, you have to pay to fix them, so I just never bother. Sorry, Dampé. Glad to see more Ocarina of Time representation, though. Final good thing, maybe even the best thing. It's the story. Specifically, it's how it expands the Zelda lore. Okay, we're going a little deeper here, so spoilers if you haven't made it far enough into the game. Let me give you a chance to click away, just in case you haven't. All right, we're gonna talk about it. You better hurry. Hope you're not scrambling to find the remote or something, because here we go. Okay, so, new villain, Null. Awesome. Not only that, but a villain that existed before the creation of the Zelda universe itself, along with the revelation that everything was made as a prison for this villain? Absolutely crazy. Going into the game, I did not expect any sort of significant story, and I certainly didn't expect a story that reached back further than any other game and permanently deepened the canon as we know it. Once more, the cutesy art style just really lowered my guard. And even if the overall plot plays out a bit simply, this revelation, combined with some nice story beats and the ever-present threat of the rifts, makes for a narrative experience that I can say cleanly exceeded my expectations. And final bad thing, which is only half serious because it's not even a criticism of the game itself. We almost got a Zelda Maker, but then they scrapped the idea and instead gave us the little dungeon remix thing in the Link's Awakening remake. Then, somehow, against all odds, we almost got a Zelda Maker again, but then they scrapped the idea and instead gave us Echoes of Wisdom. And if they played around with the idea of letting us create Zelda dungeons twice that we know of, and each time they decided it wasn't good and turned to something else instead, I kind of doubt they're gonna give it a third shot. Whatever else I may think of this game, I've got to try really hard not to see it as the game that killed my dream of custom Zelda dungeons. Those are my 7 best and worst things about Echoes of Wisdom, but I would love to see yours down in the comments. And if you have 5 things instead, or maybe 10 things, that's cool too. Heck, give me like 7 good things and 4.5 bad things. I don't care. There's no rules. Do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell. We'll all support you. Whatever you choose. Be your best self.